Hello guys, welcome back to Read Aloud. Now, last we were here, what happened to Despereaux? He fainted, right? He was so brave and so excited and so proud of himself, and then it was just like, but his nerves were just like, oh, boom. So, we'll have to see what happened next. What does the Mouse Council think of that? And who is the Thread Master? Now, one thing I forgot at the beginning, I was so excited to get into this book, is there are two things. One is a subtitle. So it is The Tale of Despereaux, being the story of a mouse, a princess, some soup, and a spool of thread. Now, we're pretty much introduced to all of those things, but there's actually a whole lot more. This whole book is broken down into 4 separate books within it. And this book is the first, A Mouse is Born. So we'll have to see what the next 3 are. We're still in the first one. This is chapter 11, The Thread Master Cometh. When Despereaux came to, he heard the drum. His father was beating a rhythm that had much more boom and much less pat. Together, Lester and the drum produced an ominous sound that went something like this. Ominous is spooky. Boom, boom, tat, boom. Boom, boom, tap. Can you imagine doing that for your own child? What does that say about Despereaux's father? What character traits could you say about him? Does he have? Make way for the thread, cried a mouse, who was pushing a wooden spool of red thread through the crowd. Make way for the thread. Boom, boom, boom. Tat went the drum. To the dungeon, shouted the mice. Despereaux lay on his back, blinking. How, had he wondered, had things gone so terribly wrong? Wasn't it a good thing to love? In the story in the book, love was a very good thing. Because the knight loved the fair maiden, he was able to rescue her. They lived happily ever after. It said so in the book. They were the last words on the page. Happily ever after. Despereaux was certain that he had read those exact words time and time again. Lying on the floor with the drum beating and the mice shouting and the thread master calling out, "Make way! Make way!" Despereaux had a sudden, chilling thought. Had some other mouse eaten the words that spoke the truth? Did the knight and the fair maiden really not live happily ever after? Reader, do you believe there's such a thing as happily ever after? Or, like Despereaux, have you too begun to question the possibility of happy endings? Happily ever after, whispered Despereaux. Happily ever after, he said again as the spool of thread came to stop beside him. The thread! The thread! The thread! Shouted the mice. I'm sorry, said the mouse behind the spool, but I have to ask you to stand up. I have to do my job." Despereaux got slowly to his feet. "On your hind legs, please," said the threadmaster. "It's the rules." Despereaux stood on his hind legs. "Thank you," said the mouse. "I appreciate it." While Despereaux watched, the threadmaster unwound a length of red thread from the spool and tied a loop. "Just enough for the neck," muttered the mouse. "No more, no less. That's what the last threadmaster taught me. Enough thread for the neck." He looked up at Despereaux, and then down back at the loop of thread. "And you, my friend, have a small neck." The threadmaster raised his arms and put them around Despereaux's neck. He leaned in close, and Despereaux smelled celery. He could feel the threadmaster's breath in his ear as he worked tightening the thread. "Is she beautiful?" the threadmaster whispered. "What?" said Despereaux. "Shh. Is the princess beautiful?" "The Princess Bee?" "Yes. She is lovely beyond all imagining," said Despereaux. "Just right," said the threadmaster. He drew back. He nodded his head. "A lovely princess, just so, like a fairy tale. And you love her as a knight loves a maiden. You love her with a courtly love, a love that is based on bravery and courtesy and honor and devotion. Just so." "How do you know that?" Despereaux said. "How do you know about fairy tales?" "Shh." The mouse leaned in closer, and Despereaux smelled celery again, green and alive. "Be brave, friend," said the threadmaster. "Be brave for the princess." And then he stepped back and turned and shouted, "Fellow mice, the thread has been tied. The thread has been knotted." A roar of approval went up from the crowd. Despereaux squared his shoulders. He made a decision. He would do as the threadmaster suggested. He would be brave for the princess. Even if, reader, could it be true? There was no such thing as happily ever after. Chapter 12. Adieu. The sound of the drum changed again. The final tat disappeared, and it became nothing but boom. Boom, 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 boom. Lester used only his tail, bringing it down with great force and seriousness upon the drum. The threadmaster retreated. The room full of mice fell silent, expectant. waiting. And as Despereaux stood before them with the red thread around his neck and the 14 members of the Mouse Council on the bricks above him, 2 burly mice came forward. Black pieces of cloth covered their heads. There were slits for their eyes. "We," said the bigger of the 2 mice, "will escort you to the dungeon." "Despereaux!" Antoinette called out. "Oh, my Despereaux!" Despereaux looked out into the crowd of mice and saw his mother. She was easy to spot. In honor of her youngest mouse being sent to the dungeon, she had put on a tremendous amount of makeup. Each of the hooded mice put a paw on Despereaux's shoulder. "It's time," said the one on the left, the first hood. Antoinette pushed her way through the crowd. "It is my son," she said. "I want to have a last word with my son." Despereaux looked at his mother. He concentrated on standing before her without trembling. He concentrated on not being a disappointment. "Please," said Antoinette, "what will happen to him? What will happen to my baby?" "Ma'am," said the first hood. His voice was deep and slow. "You don't want to know." "I want to know! I want to know! He is my child, the dad of my heart, the last of my mice babies." The hooded mice said nothing. "Tell me," said Antoinette. "The rat," said the first. "The rats," said the second. Yes, we, the rat. What of them?" "The rats will eat them," said the second hood. "Oh," said Antoinette, "Mon Dieu!" At the thought of being eaten by rats, Despereaux forgot about being brave. He forgot about being not a disappointment. He felt himself heading into another faint. But his mother, who had an excellent sense of dramatic timing, beat him to it. She executed a beautiful, flawless swoon and landed right at Despereaux's feet. "Now you've done it," said the first hood. "Doesn't matter," said the second. "Step over. We have a job to do. Nobody's mother's gonna stop us. To the dungeon." "To the dungeon," repeated the first hood. But his voice, so deep and certain a moment ago, now shook a tiny bit. He put a paw on Despereaux and tugged him forward, and the 2 hoods in Despereaux stepped over Antoinette. The crowd parted. The mice began again to chant, "To the dungeon! To the dungeon! To the dungeon!" The drumbeat continued. Boom, 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 boom. And Despereaux was led away. At the last moment, Antoinette came out of her faint and shouted one word to her child. That real word, reader, was adieu. Do you know the definition of adieu? Don't bother with your dictionary. I will tell you. Adieu is the French word for farewell. Farewell is not a word that you want to hear from your mother as you're being led to the dungeon by 2 oversized mice in black hoods. Words that you would like to hear are, take me instead. I will go to the dungeon in my son's place. There's a great deal of comfort in those words. But reader, there is no comfort in the word farewell, even if you say it in French. Farewell is a word that in any language is full of sorrow. It is a word that promises absolutely nothing. Chapter 13, Perfidy Unlimited. Remember, perfidy is betrayal. Together, the three mice traveled down, down, down. The thread around Despereaux's neck was tight. He felt as if it were choking him. He tugged at it with one paw. Don't touch the thread, barked the second hood. Yeah, echoed the first hood. Don't touch the thread. They moved quickly. And whenever Despereaux slowed, one of the two hoods poked him in the shoulder and told him to keep moving. They went through holes in the walls and down golden stairs. They went past rooms with doors that were closed and doors that were flung wide. The three mice traveled across marble floors and under heavy velvet drapes. They moved through warm patches of sunlight and dark pools of shade. This, thought Despereaux, was the world he was leaving behind. The world he knew and loved. And somewhere in it, the Princess P was laughing and smiling and clapping her hands to music, unaware of Despereaux's fate. That he would not be able to let the princess know what had become of him seemed suddenly unbearable to the mouse. Would it be possible for me to have a last word with the princess? Said Despereaux. A word? Said the second hood. You want a word with a human? I want to tell her what's happened to me. Gee, said the first hood. He stomped and stamped a paw on the floor in frustration. Jeez, you can't learn, can you? The voice was terribly familiar to Despereaux. Furlough, he said. What? Said the first hood, irritably. Despereaux shuddered. His own brother was delivering him to the dungeon. His heart stopped beating and shrunk to a small, cold, disbelieving pebble. But then, just as quickly, it leapt alive again, beating with hope. Furlough, Despereaux said, and he took one of his brother's paws in his own. Please, let me go. Please, I'm your brother. Furlough rolled his eyes. He took his paw out of Despereaux's. No, he said. No way. Please, said Despereaux. No, said Furlough. Rules are rules. Reader, do you recall the word perfidy? As our story progresses, perfidy becomes an ever more appropriate word, doesn't it? Perfidy was certainly the word that was in Despereaux's mind as the mice finally approached the narrow, steep stairs that led to the black hole of the dungeon. They stood, the three mice, two with hoods and one without, contemplating the abyss before them. The abyss, it's like huge, cavernous emptiness. You don't know what's down there. And they're just like... Then Furlough stood up on his hind legs and placed his right paw over his heart. For the good of the castle mice, he announced to the darkness. "We deliver this day to the dungeon a mouse in need of punishment. He is, according to the laws we have established, wearing the red thread of death." "The red thread of death," repeated Despereaux in a small voice. Wearing the red thread of death was a terrible phrase, but the mouse didn't have long to consider its implications, because he was suddenly pushed from behind by the hooded mice. The push was a strong one, and it sent Despereaux flying down the stairs into the dungeon. As he tumbled, whisker over tail, through the darkness, there were only 2 words in his mind. One was perfidy, and the other word that he clung to was perfidy. Perfidy. These were the words that pinwheeled through Despereaux's mind as his body descended into darkness. Oh my. What's going to happen to him down there? It's pinwheel through his mind. A pinwheel that you blow on and it spins. Wow. Betrayal and love. Think about those 2 things. What do they have in common and what do they not? See you next time.